So much happening on the pandemic front again today. Let's get some of the always sensible and insightful advice from Professor Peter Collignon, who joins us from Canberra again. Peter, first up, I wonder if you can get your thoughts on the WHO investigation in Wuhan. They go there, they tell us that they've taken most of their evidence from the Chinese scientists. They tell us they haven't learnt much, but they can rule out the lab, and they reckon frozen food could be involved.
Well, I don't think it actually, what I've seen in the media, gives us more information than what we sort of knew before. I mean, this is very likely to have developed in China from bats initially, and either via the lab, a leak, or probably more likely through some other animals to people. It was spreading, it was unrecognised for a while, and then from Wuhan it spread to the rest of the world. Now, I mean, I think the Chinese are sort of saying, oh, maybe it came from somewhere else, but that's by far the most likely possibility. And the frozen food issue, I mean, the Chinese have been saying that for different outbreaks they've had at times. I think they were blaming Norwegian salmon at one stage, but really that's very unlikely. Australia imports a lot of frozen food from all around the world. And given that we have no transmission or minimal transmission in Australia, we'd be seeing little outbreaks if that was the case, and wouldn't know where it came from. And you might remember Auckland last September, October, when they had 200 people affected by an outbreak. That was thought, oh, did it come from Melbourne through frozen food? And while you couldn't exclude it was the least likely of the other possibilities, either a recurrence of the strain that was circulating there, or probably some leak from a quarantine hotel or return visitor that then caused a problem. So I think some of the theories put up, like the frozen food, I think that's very, very unlikely. I don't think we can exclude it was a leak from the laboratory. It would have been accidental and probably unknown. But if you postulate animals, this virus or a bat virus was in the lab, probably was in some humanised cell lines. It could have leaked out, but equally it's probably more likely it was bats to animals to people.
I wonder if I can get your thoughts just on the importance of that knowledge, though. Professor Nikolai Petrovsky from Flinders University last night told us that if we knew it was an accidental leak from the lab, in many ways that would be more reassuring because we know how it's transpired and it's not going to happen too often. Whereas if we think this has mutated from a natural transmission from animals to humans, that's more worrying because we could be seeing more instances like this emanating from China and elsewhere.
Yeah, perversely, I think that's true because if you have a virus and it's in a laboratory and it's either in monkey cells or human cells, that would humanise it and make it easier to go from person to person if it should leak or somehow. So yes, in some ways it'd be more reassuring, but the bottom line is we'll never know, I suspect. Unless there is some evidence somewhere that's buried that's going to surface, I don't think we'll ever know. So I think it's more likely, I think it was bats directly to people and then to person or another animal, a bit like SARS-1, and then got humanised when it got into people and was readily transmissible. But at the end of the day, at this point of time, we've got a virus that's readily transmissible from person to person, spreads mainly by droplets. We know what we can do to decrease its spread. We, developing vaccines, and hopefully that will put stomp it down. But, how much we can take this, we were all worried about, an influenza virus doing this. This, to some degree, was out of left field. So this is a risk we're going to have. The only good news is so far it's only happened badly like this once every 100 years, and hopefully it'll be that low activity rate again.
Indeed. Now, just on that, though, I want to get your thoughts finally on Melbourne. We've seen some consequences already with border closures and more restrictions in the Victorian CBD, yet we've only got 11 people associated with a known hotel quarantine cluster. Are we overreacting to this, even if it is the so-called UK strain?
Well, I think we've got to look at the track record for Australia. We've been very good when this has got out of control or it escaped into the community at getting on top of it. And with, lockdowns not making a lot of difference, and I think a lot of travel restrictions not making that much difference either for people taking it over borders when it's there. But equally, this last cluster, I think, shows that we need to look at what's happening in hotels. All of them, all 3 episodes they've had in the last week, there's identifiable factors. People not wearing, for instance, eye protection, face shields all the time. And we know your eyes are just as susceptible as your nose or mouth. So if you're in a situation where air is going further than it should because the rooms are positive pressure and people are opening doors, we've got to make sure people sitting in corridors are adequately protected. And we've got to stop with better governance and better supervision to make sure things like nebulizers, which do produce lots of aerosols and are much more of a risk, and does explain why you have multiple people, because aerosols widely disseminate and can go further. So it makes sense to me that the last episode was aerosols and you need different protection, but what you really need is to make sure it doesn't happen again. And the others are one-offs, which fits with droplets going maybe a bit further than 2 metres. But if we wear good masks and good eye protection, we should be able to stop that from happening.
Peter, thanks so much for joining us again.
Thank you.